And in that moment, in this imagined American TV showdown, Prince Harry realized he was in a space he couldn't steer. Under the bright, clinical glow of the Real Time with Bill Maher studio, Harry sat opposite Bill. The set was minimalist by design. No couches, no warm wood paneling, no flashing applause signs. Just two chairs, a little table, a darkened audience, and the Los Angeles skyline glowing behind a pane of glass. It wasn't built to comfort guests, it was built to strip them down. As the cameras rolled, Harry tugged once at his jacket, then stilled. His posture was steady, almost rehearsed. This was far from his first high-pressure sit-down. He'd endured relentless tabloid scrutiny, royal press packs, formal inquiries, internet storms. Tonight, he told himself, was simply another chance to explain. Bill leaned back, fingers loosely interlaced, eyes clear and watchful. "Prince Harry," he said in an even tone, "thanks for being here." "Appreciate the invitation," Harry replied, giving a polite nod. A short burst of applause faded quickly. The room settled into a thick hush. Bill didn't rush to fill it. "You've talked a lot," Bill began, "about stepping away, about choosing your own path, leaving behind what you've called an oppressive structure." Harry nodded. "That's true. And you've also said the cost of that decision was enormous." "It was," Harry answered, letting the word hang. The opening stretch was surprisingly gentle. Harry spoke about mental well-being, breaking harmful cycles, prioritizing his immediate family over an ancient institution. Familiar themes surfaced: honesty, boundaries, emotional repair, telling the truth. Bill listened carefully, never cutting in, never challenging. Oddly, that made Harry more uneasy than open confrontation would have. Then Bill tilted his head ever so slightly. He said, "There's one thing I keep circling back to." Harry glanced up. "Go on." "You talk about escaping privilege," Bill said, a faint half-smile appearing. "But your escape route came with a best-selling memoir, major streaming projects, and global press attention." A low ripple went through the audience. Harry's shoulders tensed just a fraction. "Speaking publicly about pain doesn't cancel out the pain," he said deliberately. Bill nodded. "Of course, money doesn't make hurt vanish." He paused. "But it does change how the world reacts when you describe that hurt." Harry's brow furrowed. "Explain what you mean." Bill leaned forward just a little. "When someone born into extraordinary advantages says, 'I was silenced,' people listen, but they also quietly wonder, silenced by whom exactly?" The quiet in the room deepened. Harry shifted in his chair. "By the system," he replied, "by the monarchy, the media, the expectations that come with both." Bill dipped his head. "I understand that, but here's where I draw a line. You weren't voiceless. You were filtered." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Harry's jaw clenched. "With respect, that sounds dismissive." Bill lifted a hand in a light, calming gesture. "Not dismissive, specific. Being silenced means you're shut out completely. You, from a very young age, had one of the loudest platforms on Earth. What you didn't have was full control over how that platform was used." Harry leaned in closer. "Control over my own life is exactly what was taken from me." Bill didn't push back on that. "Maybe so," Bill said, "but once control becomes the center of the mission, sometimes the emphasis shifts. It can stop being about freedom and start becoming about curating a storyline." For the first time, a flicker of anger flashed across Harry's face. "So what, you're claiming my experience is just a brand strategy?" "I'm suggesting," Bill replied smoothly, "that over time it started to look branded, at least from the outside." The atmosphere tightened. Harry opened his mouth, hesitated, then tried again.
I never went looking for this level of examination. Bill tilted his head slightly. No, but you did decide to turn that examination into content. A sharp inhale came from somewhere in the audience. Harry let out a single humorless laugh. That's a pretty loaded way to put it. Is it? Bill asked, glancing toward the camera, then back to Harry. Books, shows, paid talks, even mental health specials, all orbiting the same central idea. Let me walk you through what was done to me. Harry's voice cooled. You don't get to label my coping mechanism. Bill's slight smile disappeared, replaced with a more focused intensity. I'm not labeling your healing. I'm questioning the industry that's sprung up around it. The sentence landed like a weight. Harry leaned back and crossed his arms across his chest. This is the issue, he said. People like you think there's a correct way pain should look. Bill responded without missing a beat. No, I think pain gets risky when it becomes the main ingredient in someone's identity. The audience went utterly still. Harry stared at him, and for the first time since the conversation started, he didn't have an immediate response. Something in the room had shifted. This no longer felt like a regular late-night interview. It felt like a teardown, and they were only in the early stages. The silence after Bill's last remarks stretched longer than anyone expected. Harry slowly uncrossed his arms, as if moving too quickly might reveal more than he wanted. He forced a small smile, the kind of smile that tries to reassure everyone that nothing has gone off the rails. You're oversimplifying, Harry said. Trauma doesn't turn into identity just because people finally pay attention. Bill nodded once, staying composed. You're right, he said, but when attention turns into applause, and applause turns into revenue, it becomes fair to ask, where does genuine recovery end and performance begin? A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd. Not quite supportive, not quite hostile, mostly anxious. Harry leaned in, elbows resting on his knees. This is you keep mentioning money like it cancels out what someone's been through, he said. Would you make the same argument to a soldier who writes about his experiences after war? Bill answered instantly. No, he said, because that soldier didn't grow up in palaces under crowns. The audience reacted in a wave of hushed gasps. Harry's eyes narrowed. So now my birth automatically disqualifies my pain. Bill replied, voice steady. No, it just puts it in a very specific frame. Context is not the same as invalidation. He settled back, crossing one leg over the other. Here's what I find really interesting, Bill continued. You say you left power, status, and royal duty behind. Harry nodded firmly. I did. But you didn't step into obscurity. You stepped into a new role, the global symbol of someone who says he was wronged by royalty. Harry blew air sharply through his nose. That's offensive. Is it untrue? Bill asked. Harry shook his head and gave a short, tense laugh. You're making it sound like I staged my own banishment. Bill's tone softened, which somehow made it sting more. Exile usually implies that you were pushed out and locked out. You were still invited to events, still expected, still welcomed by many. You walked away, but you didn't vanish. Harry's voice rose a little. Invited where my every word was twisted, where my wife was torn apart online and in print. Bill nodded. The coverage of Meghan was vicious at times, I don't dispute that. Harry eased up a second, until Bill added, but when you speak about all of this, you're doing it from a position almost no one else shares. Extensive security, top legal teams, massive public interest. Harry straightened, jaw tight. So what's the acceptable threshold of suffering for someone like me? He asked. How miserable do I need to be before it finally counts to people like you? The audience fell quiet again. Bill studied him for a moment. "That's not the real question," he said. "The real question is why it's so important to you that it be counted at all." Harry blinked. "It isn't," he snapped. Bill lifted an eyebrow. "Then why keep trying to prove it?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Harry raked a hand through his hair, irritation clearly visible now. "This is exactly why people keep it all inside," he said. "The second they open up, someone with a platform decides they're exaggerating." Bill let him speak, not jumping in. "And when that person happens to be a prince," he continued, "suddenly there's this invisible scoreboard your pain has to hit before anyone will take it seriously." Bill leaned closer. "Pain needs nobody's permission," he said, "but trust is built on consistency." Harry frowned. "Spell that out." "It means," Bill said, "you can't ask for privacy and then—"
Harry stared down on the floor, and in that charged silence one thing became unmistakably clear. They weren't really debating monarchy anymore. They were arguing over identity. When the show returned from the break, something fundamental had shifted. Harry was still in his seat, but his entire frame was tighter, shoulders rigid, jaw locked. The tension sat between him and Bill like a third person. Bill spotted it instantly. He didn't rush to speak. He let the quiet sit. "Before the break," Bill said calmly, "we were talking about who you are beneath the headlines." Harry gave a short, clipped nod. "You've said you don't need validation. You've said you're not looking for forgiveness." "Because I'm not," Harry cut in. Bill raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." The audience fell silent again. "Here's what I'm asking," Bill said in a level tone. "If tomorrow the cameras turned off, the book sales dried up, the interviews stopped, who would you be then?" Harry went very still. Not furious, at least not yet, just exposed. "I'd still be me," he said after a moment. Bill's mouth twitched in a faint, skeptical smile. "Would you?" Harry frowned. "What are you implying?" "I'm saying," Bill replied, leaning slightly forward, "most people don't get to construct their sense of self around opposition to an institution, to the press, to an image." Harry shook his head. "You're basically saying my personality is just conflict." "I'm saying," Bill answered, "it's heavily rooted in pushing back, and pushing back can turn into purpose all by itself." Harry let out a brittle laugh. "And you see a problem with resisting injustice?" "There's nothing wrong with calling out real harm. The problem comes when the harm is the only thing that still gives meaning to the narrative." A soft murmur ran through the studio. Harry leaned in again, voice climbing. "Do you like living under labels, attacks, and mockery?" Bill nodded slowly. "No, I think you adapted to it, and once we adapt to something, even if it's awful, it can start to feel like the only thing that makes sense." That hit harder than almost anything before. Harry's eyes flashed. "That's nonsense." "Is it?" Bill asked. "You left royal life to get away from the damage it caused, but every major chapter since then has involved reopening that same wound in public." Harry's hands tightened together. "You don't heal by pretending nothing happened," he shot back. "I agree, but you also don't heal by making the worst thing that ever happened to you the headline forever." Another audible intake of breath moved through the crowd. "So what's your grand solution?" Harry demanded. "Silence?" "Perspective," Bill answered. Harry scoffed. "Easy to talk about perspective from your side of the desk." Bill didn't dodge it. "You're right," he said. "It is easier from here." The honesty unsettled the room. "And that," Bill went on, "is exactly why people pay attention to you. You didn't start at the bottom, you started at the very top. So when you say everything was stolen from me, people naturally ask, stolen compared to whose life?" Harry's face tightened. "My childhood," he said, "my mother, my ability to decide basic things about my own existence." Bill's voice softened again. "Those are devastating losses. No one with a heart would deny that."
Harry's shoulders eased a fraction. But those losses, Bill added, don't automatically make you the final judge of what's right and wrong in every arena. Harry's brief relaxation vanished. You don't get to decide that, he snapped. I don't, Bill said. Crowds do, readers do, viewers do. Harry laughed harshly. Oh, the public, he said sarcastically. You mean the same public that doom scrolls tabloids and outrage for fun. Bill gave a small shrug. The same public that buys your autobiography and streams your series. The audience gasped again. Harry pushed halfway out of his seat before stopping himself. You keep twisting this into some kind of debt, he said, voice tight, like I owe everyone something just because I speak. Bill reclined a bit. Not debt, but once you ask millions of people to listen, you invite them to have opinions, supportive or not. Harry dragged his hand across his forehead. This is the problem, he said. People like you— Careful, Bill said gently. Harry paused, then pushed on. People like you use clever arguments to wave away what someone's actually lived through. Bill's smile thinned. And people in your position can lean on personal experience to avoid hard questions. The room went utterly silent again. Harry's breathing was heavier now. You're twisting everything, he said. Bill tilted his head. Then straighten it. Harry hesitated. I wanted a life where I wasn't defined by an institution that treated me like a piece on a chessboard. Bill nodded. And yet, every explanation you give still starts with that institution. Harry's voice wavered slightly. Because it never really lets go. Bill didn't miss a beat. Or, he said quietly, because you don't let it. The line hit like a punch. Harry stood up this time, not storming off yet, but no longer seated. You just crossed a line, he said quietly. Bill stayed sitting. I think, he replied, that line was stepped over a long time ago, not just me. The host's voice broke in, nervous. Let's just take a breath, gentlemen. Harry didn't react. You're turning this into a spectacle. My life, my hurt as entertainment. Bill looked up at him calmly. You already brought it onto the stage, he said. I'm just asking what that choice costs you. The silence was suffocating. Harry stared down at Bill, chest heaving slightly, and for the first time the audience saw it clearly. This wasn't just anger, it was exposure. Bill spoke once more before the show cut to another break. Harry, he said softly, if your healing only exists while you're performing it for us, was it ever really healing? Harry didn't reply. He turned away from the chair. The cameras faded out. When the show came back again, no one said a word for 3 full seconds. On live TV, that felt like forever. Harry was standing now, still, not pacing, hands hanging loosely by his sides. His gaze seemed to be fixed somewhere beyond the lights, beyond Bill, beyond the crowd, as if he were already halfway out the door. Bill remained seated, composed and motionless. The contrast was stark. Harry, the host said carefully, tension in his voice, why don't we sit down and— Harry lifted a hand. No, he said softly. The word wasn't loud, but it carried. I'm finished. Bill looked up at him, not gloating, not smug, just curious. You asked who I'd be without the cameras, Harry said, turning back to him. His voice shook, not with fear, but with controlled rage. You asked who I am if I stop telling this story. Bill nodded once. Yes. What you don't see, Harry continued, is that this story keeps getting revived because people in your chair keep demanding fresh pieces of it. Bill leaned forward a fraction. Or, he said evenly, because you keep agreeing to hand those pieces over. That was the breaking point. You sit there, Harry said, voice rising now, wrapped in sarcasm and clever quips, acting like you've decoded human suffering. Bill didn't cut him off. You flatten real lives into tidy roles, victim, hero, villain, as if we're just characters in your monologues. Bill finally spoke. Labels are one way people try to understand patterns. Harry let out a sharp laugh. No, labels are how you dodge responsibility for what you're doing right now. The audience shifted uneasily. You want to know why I keep speaking? Harry asked, pointing down between them. Because keeping quiet is what protected the people who did the damage. Keeping quiet is what destroyed my mother. A loud gasp rippled through the room. Bill's expression shifted into something more deeply serious. Don't go there, he said quietly. Go where? Harry shot back, using her memory as a shield to deflect every uncomfortable question. The air in the studio turned to ice. Harry's eyes widened. How dare you? He whispered. Bill held his gaze. How dare you, he said calmly, pull her into this every time someone probes a little too deeply. You could feel the entire room holding its breath. You don't get to tell me how to grieve, Harry said, his voice trembling now. No, Bill answered, but I can ask at what point grief starts getting packaged and resold. The sentence detonated the mood. Harry stepped back as if hit. The host half rose from his chair. All right, let's stop here nervously. But Harry wasn't hearing him. You want the truth, Harry said, voice raw. I'm furious, I'm exhausted, and yeah, maybe I don't fully know who I am if I walk away from all of this. Bill didn't smile, didn't crow, he just nodded. That, he said softly, is the most honest thing you've said all night. The audience went silent again. Harry stared at him, breathing heavily. Then something in his expression changed. The anger didn't disappear, but it sharpened into clarity. You know what, Harry said slowly, I didn't come here to be picked apart like a case study. No one ever does, Bill replied gently. Harry turned to the host, then looked out at the crowd. This, he said, motioning around the studio, is exactly what I was running from, this appetite for tearing people